I absolutely love buttons. I think they're just so much fun, colorful, come in different shapes, made of different materials. I love the natural looking ones as well. Today, I'm going to be sharing some different button craft ideas. I hope this inspires you. Let's get started. For this project, I'm using an assortment of buttons. I'm using a needle that's got a blunt end, but the needle fits through the holes at the buttons. And I'm using some crochet thread, but use any thread you like. I've always wanted to try making a garland out of some buttons, and I could never quite figure out how to do it. So I finally learned how, and it's actually easier than you think. So I'm going to be taking 3 even lengths of the string here, but of course use any length that you like. It really depends on how long you want your garland to be. I'm going to just trim that off now, and then I'm going to be just stringing this through one small button, and I'm just going to tie just a basic knot around that button. What that's going to do is prevent any of my buttons from falling off on this one end. You could add a bead there instead if you'd like. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle here. You could use some embroidery floss if you'd like, but I had this big ball of some crochet thread, so I thought I'd go ahead and use that. All right, so now to thread your buttons. I'm going to be going in one hole, and then I'm going to be going down the second hole across from it. This button does have a total of 4 holes, but I'm only going to be stitching into 2 of the holes. I guess there is a way where you could stitch in all 4, but I chose to do it this way just because it's a little bit easier. So you can see I've got my first stitch. Now I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to repeat that stitch, going to the left, coming up through the front, going down on the right, and then that will be my second stitch. And I will be ending with the thread on underneath to the right. So then I'll be able to continue to add some more buttons. So again, we're going to grab another button, and I'm going to be going up one hole, and then the hole that's opposite from it, I'm going to go down, and then I'm going to go back up that hole that's to the left underneath, pull that through, and then I'm going to go back down in the front on the right hand side. One tip I'll give you is when you pull your next button onto your string, hold the 2 buttons that are side by side together. That way here, your buttons will be spaced out evenly. I mean, if that is not a concern for you, then don't worry about it. But I did want somewhat of a uniform look, and I found that if I held the 2 buttons side by side and then did my stitching, it helped to hold that button in place so I was able to continue on. All right, so I've reached the end of my strand here, so I'm just going to add one more small button on the end and just finish it off with a knot, just like I did for the start, and then it's ready to be used. You could use this, you could turn it into a necklace, or you could even make a bracelet, or you can turn this into a garland for a Christmas tree, add it as an accent for a wall hanging, and I'll give you an example of that here in a moment. I remember as a little girl, I would dig through my mom's button basket. I just loved all the fun little pieces and little treasures. I really felt like I was like digging through a bunch of jewels. It was so much fun. I have this wood round cut out here, and I'm going to be painting it with some daffodil yellow you can use any paint color that you like. It really depends on the button selection that you choose. So I'm going to make my project a little brighter, a little bit more cheery and spring-like. So I'm going to give my entire wood slice here a coat of the yellow paint, including the edges and the bottom, and I'm going to set that aside and allow it to dry. While that's drying, I'm collecting up my buttons. You want to select buttons that are about the same thickness. You don't want to choose buttons that are like super thick compared to the thinner ones. So I'm just pressing them against the table and just feeling to see the thickness between them all. And if it was like really drastic, I did put the thick buttons aside. All right, so I've got my buttons all selected, sitting aside here. My wood slice is all nice and dry, so I gave it a coat of some tacky glue. You can see I was being quite generous, and I'm going to smooth it out. I'm just using my finger, and then I'll wipe my finger off with a rag. Just making sure that I get the glue as close to the edge of the wood slice as I can. And then I will start to apply my buttons. Now, I'm trying to evenly spread out all my different colors here. And I'm also using like similar sizes. There is a little bit of a variation, but I decided I wasn't going to go like with really big jumbo buttons with super tiny ones. That was just my own personal choice. You could just have fun with this and get creative. I'm going to go ahead and fill up as best I can, leaving few gaps in between. There will be some, which is fine. And then once I get to the edge, I'm trying my best not to allow the buttons to overhang too much. They did slightly in a few areas, but it wasn't by much. So I'm going to set that aside, allow it to dry. Once it's dry, you can then use some tape around the edge. I do apologize that I'm off camera here a little bit, but all I'm doing is adding some tape around the edge here. And you can see there's a bit of a lip that's up a little bit higher than the buttons. I'm going to go all the way around. I'm using electrical tape here. I found that it kind of molded to any of the buttons that were overhanging a little bit. And then I'm just going to trim off the excess tape here. I'm going to go around to make sure that my edges are pulled up. My tape kept on wanting to curl in on me. And I also made sure I pressed the sides really well. I'm using some dimensional magic. It's put out by Mod Podge. And I'm going to now fill in around all the buttons. This has a similar consistency to resin, but I will let you know this is not waterproof. So I'm actually going to be turning this into a candle holder, like a little coaster for a tea light candle. And all I'm doing is going around, filling it in, and then I'm going to go over it again and really generously apply the dimensional magic. This is really fun stuff. You can see it here. I'm going to go in and continue to fill it in, and you can see how nice and milky it is. It has not dried yet. There's still a few more spots that I needed to fill in, so I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit more, and then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry well. Now, if you are wanting to use this as an actual coaster for a drink, I would use resin. I would not be using the dimensional magic. Okay, so I've allowed it to dry overnight, and this is what it looks like. You could add another layer if you'd like. That's totally up to you. I decided to leave mine as is. It'll do for what I need it for. I'm going to go ahead and remove the tape now. There is going to be a little bit of texture around the edges, and some of them might be like I don't want to say sharp, but there's just some jagged edges. So I wanted to remove those. I'm going to take a craft knife and just kind of slice some of those little edges off. And I'm also going to use a little bit of sandpaper and to sand those down as well. Okay, I will say I did mess up on this particular project. I tried using a spray on it and I got a really bad finish and I didn't really like it. I'm going to show you what I did just so you can see the outcome of that mistake. And instead of using semi-gloss spray to protect your surface, I would definitely recommend a gloss spray. So I did try the semi-gloss clear put out from Rust-Oleum, and I gave my buttons 2 coats of this, and you'll see I don't know, it left a really weird pitted finish, and I really didn't like that. So I thought I'm going to correct it using some triple thick glaze by Decor. Again, this is a water-based product, so if you're wanting to set a cup on this, I don't recommend it. I would definitely recommend you make your coaster out of resin if you're wanting to use this for some beverages. So I applied 2 coats of this really thick gloss. It's like a really nice glossy finish. It'll also go on somewhat thick, so it'll kind of fill in any of those weird little pitted marks that got left behind from the spray. I allowed it to dry well in between each coat. So as I said, I set it aside, allowed it to dry. I used mine for a candle holder, but this is what it looks like without the candle, and here it is with the candle. I really like collecting some different and unique buttons. I've got 2 of these buttons right here. The yellow one, is actually a vintage piece of pottery that an artist has turned into a button. And this is not an old button, but it's still, I thought it was really neat. It is a button that another artist had made, and it's a ceramic. And I want to show you how you can put these types of buttons on display if you choose. I'll be using some manila shipping tags. I just get these from Staples, and I'm going to be using the larger size one. I just wanted to see how the smaller ones would look, and I saw that it wasn't going to work. But I just also wanted to show you the different sizes that are available. I'm going to be covering up my manila tag with some book paper. This is just old book paper left over from a previous project. I'm coating the tag with a glue stick. Just use any glue stick that you like to use. I'm trying out this Aleene's one that I picked up recently, and I'm really liking it. So I've got the glue in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and press a sheet of paper onto the tag, and I'm going to use a bone folder to really smooth that out and get a really good contact between the tag and the paper. So I've allowed the glue to dry, and then all I'm going to do is work on this backwards here. You can see I'm tearing the paper back away from the edge. You could use scissors if you like, but I kind of wanted that kind of raw, torn edge look to this, so I thought this would be the easiest way to do that. I am going to be doing 2 tags, but I'm just going to demonstrate the procedures on one because they're both going to be the same. I needed to punch out the hole, and this hole puncher, it was too big. So I do recommend just using a pencil and just stabbing it through that hole, and that will be fine. You can just pull away any of the excess paper. I'm going to accent the edges of the tags with some ink. This is some archival ink in a really pretty green color. It looked nice with my little bird. I'm using a makeup sponge here to apply the ink around the edges. And then I'm going to be using a Distress Oxide for the second tag. I thought it looked really pretty with the button. I'm going to use this button here with that. But once I got it on the tag, I noticed I'm like, this isn't actually quite the same color. So I went in and added just a touch of green around the yellow edge, and that helped to tie it together a little bit better. All right, so I let the ink dry a little bit, and now I'm going to finish working on this. I've just got this decorative piece of paper. I thought it would be really pretty to add it to the tag. I really like this. This is like from a kit that I received a few years ago from a company, and I liked it because it had these really pretty green stamps on it. and I thought it would look nice with the bird, and it's a quick and easy way to decorate something quickly. But feel free to decorate your tags any way you'd like. You could use scrapbook paper if you'd like as well. I'm going to go ahead and ink up the edges of this paper as well. And then I'm going to be using my glue stick again and applying this paper to the front of the tag. So I'm really liking this so far. It's really simple, but I felt like it needed just a little touch more. So I'm going to be using this waxed hemp cord, and I'm going to just tie it around the center through the holes of each of my buttons. I just felt like it just needed that little extra touch. Of course, you could use some embroidery floss if you'd like. That would be nice too, but I haven't used this hemp cord before, so I thought I would give it a try. And all I'm going to do is just tie a simple knot and just trim off any of the excess tails, and then I will be gluing this into place. I am using some hot glue just to let you know, if I decide that I want to use these buttons for another project, it'll be easy enough for me to clean off that glue on the back. I've done this before and it worked just fine for me. So for another added touch, I'm going to add a word sticker. You could also clip some words out of a book or a magazine, and you could use those. I just like the way that this looks, but you can see here the word gets kind of hidden there, and I'll show you what I'll be doing just to help to make it pop. But first I decided I'm going to add my trim just as a little hanger to the top. I just folded the trim in half, pushed that loop through the hole, and then pulled the tails through the hole as you saw me doing there. And now I'm just going to tie those two ends together, and you could use this as a packaging tag, or you could just hang it on a hook if you'd like. To make the word pop, I'm going to use some black ink just around that word. It really does make a difference. This is something I usually do, and I really like the way it looks. I don't know, somehow it just really helps that word just to pop. But I did the same procedure for both of these tags, and I have to say I'm really happy with how simple these were to put together. And I think it's a great way to put any fancy little button on display. Of course, I had to throw in a touch of nature into one of my projects, and I think it turned out really cool. I had this old wooden picture frame, and it was actually not in very good shape. I was going to get rid of it, and I'm like, actually, I could use this for this particular project, which I've been wanting to try out for a while. I'm going to be using this card. I really like the image in it, and what I did was selected some elements that would complement that image. I've got a selection of buttons and beads. I've got some branches and some green preserved reindeer moss. All I'm going to do is glue little bits of the moss around the frame, and I'm going to just use some hot glue for this. I will let you know, as I was adding things did become a little bit fragile, so you will have to treat this gently. But overall, I was really happy with how this turned out. I'm just snapping little pieces of the branches, and then I'm going to go ahead and glue those into place, just making sure that I have touch points between the branch and the frame with using the glue. And then I know that those pieces are not going to pop off. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish just filling in some areas all the way around the frame with the moss and the branches. And then I'm going to go ahead and start to add some of the buttons and the beads. So if you'd like, you can definitely leave your picture frame just like this, or you could do like what I'm going to do and add some pretty buttons to the frame. And I'm also going to include a few beads just because I want to just to spread the color throughout that's in the picture that I had selected that will be going in here. So again, I'm just going to use some hot glue, and I'm trying my best to get contact between the glue and the picture frame just to make sure that things are going to stay in place. If you don't want to use buttons, that's totally fine. You could even use like some pretty little flowers throughout. I thought that would be a nice little touch. Use whatever you'd like, just to make a really interesting picture frame. Okay, so now for the beads. I am using some tweezers because I didn't want to accidentally burn my fingers with the hot glue. Even though my hot glue gun is on the lower temp, I still didn't want to risk it. And it also made it easier for me to place the beads throughout. So the one hazard that comes with doing a project like this is the glue strings. There was a lot. So I like to use my hair dryer and I just blow it all over the project until all those little glue strings disappear. Now it's time to place the card into the frame. So originally when I selected this card image, I didn't test it out to see if it was going to fit inside the frame. It was a little bit off, so I am going to trim things down. You could use an image from a scrapbook paper, or of course a photograph, a family photo, whatever you'd like. I just really like this image on this card. And just to help stabilize the card in place, I did use the backing of the frame, and I'm going to cut out a piece of cardboard and place that in behind the image, and that will just help to give it some support. And then to put it on display, you could add a little hook on here so you can hang it on your wall. I'm just going to be placing mine on an easel, and then you can place it on a shelf anywhere you'd like. This project has been a great way to repurpose an old grungy picture frame that just has seen some better days. I'm really happy with how this project turned out. If you're looking for some different ways on how to upcycle some different items that are in your craft stash, then you'll definitely want to check out this playlist right here. I want to thank you all so very much for joining me today, and we will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.